The wind tore across the plains. Dust whipped into Ayana's eyes. The air smelled of smoke and blood. In the distance, villages burned like torches in the night. Screams pierced the chaos, mothers crying, fathers shouting, children wailing. Horses thundered across the earth. Mongol warriors rode like shadows, their arrows slicing through the sky, their hooves shaking the ground. Every home fell. Every family was torn apart. Every life seemed fragile and fleeting. Ayana, only 14, stumbled across the scorched earth. Her clothes were tattered, her hair stuck to her face with sweat and dust. Her small hands trembled as she clutched what little she had left. Her village, her family, her home, all gone. The Mongols had taken everything, and now she had been carried to a place she could not understand, a hall carved from stone and gold, lit by flickering torches. The hall was enormous. The floor was cold and smooth beneath her bare feet. Shadows danced across the walls, stretching and shrinking with the flames. The air was heavy with incense and burnt oil mixed with something sweet, almost sickly like honey with blood. She could taste fear on her tongue, bitter and metallic. Her heart pounded so loudly she thought the whole hall could hear it. Along the walls, other girls stood. Some were her age, some younger, their eyes wide, their lips trembling, their hands clenched in silent panic. Ayana felt a shiver crawl up her spine. No one spoke. No one dared. Each girl seemed frozen, trapped in fear so deep it was almost a living thing. Then he appeared. The high priest. His robe was crimson, decorated with gold threads that caught the torchlight. A crown of black and red feathers rested on his head. He walked slowly, deliberately, eyes sharp as a hawk. The chant stopped. Silence pressed down like a stone on Ayana's chest. He leaned close. His face was serious, almost kind, but his eyes burned. His voice echoed in the hall, calm but commanding. Tonight, you are a deity. What happens here is not sin. It is the most sacred act that keeps the empire alive. The land thrives because of this. The people live because of this. Ayana's throat tightened. A deity? She barely understood. She swallowed, but her mouth was dry. Fear pressed on her chest, like a heavy weight. She looked around at the other girls. Some stared at the floor. Some whispered soft sobs. Some shivered so violently she could see their teeth chatter. The priest circled her. Slowly. He stopped behind her and lowered his hand, almost touching her shoulder. Beauty, youth, even noble birth, none can escape what must be done. But do not be afraid. Here you will learn purpose. You will learn power. You will learn what it means to keep the empire alive. Ayana wanted to scream. She wanted to run, but her legs refused. She could feel the cold stone beneath her feet, the trembling of her hands, the racing of her heart. A tiny whimper escaped her throat. Outside, chaos raged. Mongols swept across the plains, leaving death in their path. Families were torn apart. Children were captured. Mothers were killed. Fathers disappeared into the wind. Inside the hall smelled of sweat and oils. Fear was thick, almost touchable. Ayana tried to remember her village, the laughter of her younger brother, her mother's soft hands, the smell of fresh bread. But the memory felt distant, almost unreal. Everything she knew had vanished. The priest raised his hands. The torches flickered violently, casting shadows that moved like living creatures. Ayana's wide eyes reflected the flames. Somewhere in the darkness, another girl let out a soft cry. The hall was endless, cold, golden, merciless. But before I tell you exactly what happened in that sealed chamber, I need to show you the system that made it all possible. Ayana shivered. Her chest heaved. Every nerve screamed to flee, but she could not. She was trapped in a golden cage. The system that brought her here was invisible, yet powerful. Fear, obedience, and the destruction of families had made this hall. Children like Ayana were tools, tools of power, tools of conquest, tools for survival in a world that had no mercy. The chant started again, low and steady, like a heartbeat. Ayana clenched her fists. She wanted to fight, but she was too small. She wanted to cry, but the priest's eyes seemed to hold her in place. Obedience, endurance, submission. These were her only weapons. Her thoughts wandered. Would she ever see her family again? Would she remember her village? The Mongols had taken everything, and now the priest demanded even more. Her body shook. Her lips trembled. Fear, confusion, and despair tangled inside her. The priest's voice rose above the chants. None can escape what must be done. Ayana's vision blurred with tears. She tried to hold on to the small spark of hope inside her. But the hall, the golden walls, the torches, and the priest's cold gaze pressed down on her like a storm. She was no longer just a girl. She was now part of a system, a machine of fear and power she could not yet understand. The shadows on the walls stretched further. The torches flickered wildly. The other girls whispered softly, almost inaudibly. The air seemed to thrum with expectation, danger, and something darker she could not name. Ayana closed her eyes for a moment. Her chest rose and fell quickly. Her heart beat like a drum in her ears. She could feel the weight of history pressing on her shoulders. She could feel the emptiness left by the Mongols, the loss of her family, the end of everything she had ever known. And so, in the golden hall surrounded by fear, incense, and shadows, Ayana's life changed forever, one carved by others, one dictated by rules she could not yet see, one sealed by the empire, by the priest, and by the unstoppable force outside the walls. The golden hall was silent. The torches flickered. Shadows moved like living creatures. Ayana tried to catch her breath. She could still feel the fear clinging to her skin, tight like a second layer of clothing. But the priest's words lingered in her mind. What happens here keeps the empire alive. She did not understand. How could tearing families apart, taking children, destroying villages, how could this keep anyone alive? But then the priest began to speak again, slowly, carefully, as if explaining a great secret. Listen, he said. The empire is strong because its people obey. Its power comes not from armies alone, but from the system that shapes life itself. Ayana's wide eyes followed him. He spoke of rules she could not yet see, but somehow they made sense. Order, power, fear, control. Let me tell you about the system. The Mongols did not just raid villages, they broke them. They shattered families, mothers, fathers, children, all taken, killed, or scattered. Every survivor was watched, measured, judged. None could hide. None could escape. It was not chaos. It was carefully planned. Every capture, every death, every act of terror served a purpose. Young girls like Ayana were not chosen by accident. They were selected. They were tools. Their beauty, their youth, even their noble birth did not save them. Some were trained for work in distant lands. Some were given to soldiers or leaders as servants. Some were kept for purposes the world could hardly imagine. The priest paced slowly, his crimson robe brushing the floor. These children, these girls, they carry the empire inside them. Their obedience is our power. Their fear is our shield. Without them, the empire would crumble. Ayana felt her stomach twist. Fear mixed with confusion. She could not understand how cruelty could be called power. She could not understand how fear could be called protection. Yet the priest's words were firm, heavy with authority. And somewhere deep inside, she began to realize this system was older, bigger, and stronger than any army she had seen. He raised a hand. Listen closely. In this system, the elites are above human rules. They answer to no one. They can take, destroy, command. Their lives are sacred. Their acts, however dark, are necessary. Ayana shivered. She thought of the Mongols outside, tearing through villages. She thought of the screams of families, the smell of smoke, the blood on the plains, and she realized the priest was right. The system allowed such acts, and no one could stop them. The priest's voice dropped, almost a whisper, but sharp and cutting. The most shocking acts, the ones that break hearts and minds, are done not for pleasure. They are done for survival, for the empire, for order. Ayana's chest heaved. Her hands clenched. Fear and disbelief warred inside her. She wanted to run. She wanted to scream. She wanted to forget everything. But the hall was cold. The torches flickered, and the shadows seemed to whisper, "You cannot escape." This system worked like a machine. Every part had its purpose. Families destroyed to prevent rebellion. Children scattered. Bloodlines broken. Parents powerless. Captives trained and controlled to serve the empire. Obedience was forced. Disobedience punished. Fear as a tool. Every scream, every tear, every broken life reminded others of the cost of resistance. Elites untouchable. Leaders, priests, warriors, above law, above morality, above human judgment. The priest's eyes met Ayana's. His gaze was steady. Do you see now? The empire survives not because of armies alone, but because it shapes people. Because it uses fear, control, and obedience. This is the system. Her body shook. Her mind raced. She could not speak. Her fear made her small, almost invisible. But somewhere a tiny spark of understanding lit inside her. This system was unstoppable. He stepped closer, his voice rising. And this is why the most beautiful, the most noble, the most innocent, none are safe. None are free. The empire takes what it needs, it molds what it touches, and it breaks what it cannot shape. Ayana's heart pounded. She thought of her mother, her father, her little brother, gone. She thought of the villages burned, the families lost. And suddenly she understood the cruel efficiency of it all. Every horror, every act of terror, every life broken, all part of the machine. The priest's tone softened, almost gentle. This is why history will not remember them. The screams, the stolen children, the families, erased, all forgotten. Only the empire survives. Ayana felt tears rise, but she forced them back. She could not cry, not yet. The system demanded control. The system demanded obedience. She was a part of it now, whether she liked it or not. The priest paused, his eyes scanning the room. And now, listen closely. There is proof. There are records, reports, witnesses. Every act, every raid, every capture is documented. The empire never forgets what it needs to survive. Ayana's chest ached. Her mind whirled, fear, sadness, anger, confusion. How could this be called survival? How could cruelty be called order? Then the priest's voice lowered again, firm and commanding. This is the truth of the system. It is the engine behind every conquest, every empire, every fear. And it is unstoppable, unless someone understands it. Ayana swallowed. She could feel the weight of the empire pressing down on her small shoulders. She realized that she and all the others like her were caught in a system that did not care for life, love, or innocence. A system that thrived on fear, obedience, and destruction. Then, almost as an afterthought, the priest's tone softened, like he was speaking to someone alone in a dark room. Subscribe now. This will change how you see history. Comment what, Watch till the end for real names and proof. Ayana blinked. She was too young to understand everything. But one thing was clear, the system was real, powerful, merciless, and she was trapped inside it. The hall seemed to pulse with energy, like the heartbeat of the empire itself. The torches flared. The shadows moved. The girls whispered softly, trembling. Ayana took a deep breath. She forced her hands to unclench. She forced her mind to focus. And in that moment, she understood the terrible truth. The system was the reason the empire endured. The system was the reason the Mongols could conquer, destroy, and vanish without remorse. The system was the invisible hand that crushed families, broke children, and erased histories. Ayana's chest rose and fell. She shivered, but she did not look away. She understood now, and she knew she would have to survive it. The Golden Hall was quiet. The torches flickered, casting shadows that seemed alive. Ayana's hands were still trembling. She tried to breathe, tried to steady herself, but the fear inside her was like fire, burning, consuming. The priest spoke again. His voice was soft, almost gentle. Now you will learn the path. You will see what it means to be chosen. You will see the human cost. Ayana's eyes widened. Chosen path? Human cost? She did not understand, but she had no choice. She had already been taken. Already trapped. Let me tell you how it worked. The empire did not take just anyone. They took the young, the beautiful, the strong, and sometimes the weak. Age did not protect anyone. Wealth did not save families. Noble birth did not matter. The Mongols and the priests selected children with care. Some were chosen because of their appearance, some because of their intelligence, some simply because their families were vulnerable. Ayana shivered as she listened. She thought of the other girls. Some had already been trained. Some were too frightened to move. All of them carried the same silent question. Will I survive? Once chosen, the journey began. Training was long, hard, and merciless. Children were taught the skills they would need to serve the empire. Some learned dance, moving their bodies with precision and grace, bending to commands as if their bodies were instruments of power. Others learned herbs and potions, how to heal or harm, how to soothe or control. Some were trained in trance, in rituals that could calm the mind or bend it to the will of others. The training was not gentle. It was meant to break and remake them. Pain and fear were lessons. Tears were tools. Obedience was rewarded. Disobedience was punished. Ayana watched a girl 3 years older than her stumble during a lesson. The instructor's whip cracked. The girl screamed, clutching her arm, tears streaming down her face. The priest's voice was calm, almost approving. Fear teaches. Pain shapes. Obedience saves. Ayana's chest tightened. She could feel her own fear rise. She wanted to run, but her legs refused. She realized that every child in this hall had been broken in some way. And once broken, they were molded to serve. The ultimate moment came at puberty. That was when initiation began. Oils were rubbed onto the skin. Strange herbs were inhaled, sometimes causing dizziness, sometimes fear, sometimes other sensations she could not yet name. The children were taught union, a sacred act said, to connect them to the empire, to the priests, to power itself. Ayana's stomach twisted. She could not imagine, but the girls older than her did not flinch. They had already learned the rules. They had already faced the initiation. Some cried quietly. Some smiled as if nothing had happened. The human mind bends to survive. Life in this system had a clear path. First honor, if you were chosen and trained well, you were respected, almost celebrated. You became part of the machine. You carried the empire within you. You learned skills no ordinary child could master. You learned power, then came the peak. This was the time when you served directly. You were in the hallways of power, close to leaders, close to the priests. You could influence decisions. You could move through the empire like a shadow, unseen but essential. Some girls rose higher than others. Some became favorites. Some became feared, but all lives ended in decline. The empire did not keep its servants forever. Once a child grew too old, too fragile, too worn, they were discarded. Some were sent to distant lands. Some were given away. Some were punished for failing, for disobedience, for questioning. The system did not tolerate weakness. The system did not forgive mistakes. Ayana shivered at the thought. She did not want to grow old. She did not want to fail. She wanted her life back, but she knew that was impossible. Her childhood, her family, her home, all gone. What remained was fear, training, and survival. The hall echoed with soft cries. Some girls whispered to each other. Some whispered to no one. Ayana pressed her back against the cold wall. Her fingers clutched her knees. She tried to imagine what her future would be like. Honor, peak, decline, punishment. It felt like a cycle of darkness. The priest's voice broke through her thoughts. Every child chosen carries the cost of the empire. Every scream, every tear, every act of obedience, it is fuel for survival. Ayana wanted to scream back, to cry, to run, but she was frozen. Fear had learned to live in her bones. She thought of the other girls. She wondered who would survive, who would be broken, who would rise, who would fall. She remembered her village, her mother's laughter, her father's hands, her brother's small voice, all gone. And she realized the empire did not just take land. It did not just take gold. It took souls. It shaped children, broke families, erased memories. Some girls tried to resist. Some tried to hide their pain, their fear, their thoughts. But resistance was punished. Whips, isolation, hunger, humiliation, tools to bend the mind, bend the body, bend the will. Ayana swallowed hard. She knew she would have to survive. Survival meant obedience. Survival meant learning the lessons. Survival meant bending until she became invisible to the cruelty around her. Yet there were rare moments of light. Sometimes a girl would help another, sharing a whispered word, a soft touch, a brief glance of encouragement. Those moments reminded Ayana that even inside darkness, humanity persisted, even if hidden. The priest's voice softened, almost a whisper now. Remember this, the cost is high. The training is merciless. The initiation is complete. But those who survive, they carry the power of the empire. Ayana's chest rose and fell quickly. She shivered. She pressed herself closer to the wall. She could feel the weight of the empire pressing down on her small shoulders. And she realized she had no choice. She had to survive. She had to endure. She had to learn. She looked at the older girls, some hardened, some crying, silently, and she made a decision she would live. Somehow she would live. She would endure the training. She would face the initiation. She would survive the system because the alternative, breaking, dying, disappearing, was worse, much worse. And in that moment, Ayana understood the terrible truth. This was the human cost of power. Every life stolen, every child trained, every family destroyed, all part of the Empire's relentless machine. The sun rose over the Empire, golden and fierce. In the streets, people laughed, sang, and danced. Market stalls overflowed with spices, silks, and shiny coins. Children chased each other through the dust. Drums beat loudly. Bells rang. The festival had begun. But beneath the bright colors, the music, and the laughter, a darker world waited. Ayana, now older by a few months, had begun to understand that what the people saw on the streets was only a mask. Behind the golden gates, inside the palaces and halls, the elites, the rulers, the priests, the high-ranking warriors, joined in rituals that no one outside could ever imagine. The priest, his crimson robe flowing, guided Ayana and the other girls into a hidden hall. The walls gleamed with gold and jewels. Torches flickered. The air was heavy with incense, oils, and the faint scent of sweat. Ayana swallowed hard. Her heart pounded. Every step she took echoed in the hall, bouncing off walls that seemed to close in around her. "Today," the priest said, his voice smooth and commanding, "you will see the service of the Empire. You will see how the powerful maintain their strength. And you will learn your place." Ayana's stomach twisted. Her hands trembled. She looked around at the other girls. Some had already learned the rules. Some were still terrified, like she had been on her first day. Fear lived in these walls. It was thick and heavy, like a blanket that could not be shaken off. Let me tell you about the festivals of the elites. To the public, they were celebrations. Music, dance, feasts, and gifts. Everyone believed in joy. Everyone believed in the blessing of the rulers. But inside the hidden halls, the elites practiced their power in ways that were secret, sacred, and terrifying. Rituals of union, influence, and control. Acts hidden behind curtains of gold. Nothing escaped their notice. No child, no servant, no whisper. Ayana saw the rulers arrive. They were dressed in bright colors, decorated with gold and jewels. Their faces smiled at the crowd outside, but in the hall, their eyes were sharp, cold, calculating. They moved through the rooms, examining, testing, commanding. "Observe," the priest whispered. "They are the face of power, and this is how they maintain it." A young noble named Temujin, not the famous Khan, but a rising figure, approached the hall. He was handsome, tall, with a voice that could command attention. He laughed in the public halls, entertained with stories and games, but inside he moved like a predator. He examined the girls, tested their obedience, measured their fear, and rewarded the ones who pleased him. Ayana watched, frozen, as a girl trembled and lowered her gaze. Temujin smiled faintly. The girl was safer now. The festival continued. Drums beat. Music played. From the outside, the Empire seemed joyful, thriving, alive. But inside, the air was heavy with whispered commands, secret glances, and hidden acts. The priest explained in a low voice, "Public joy hides the truth. Secret acts maintain the Empire. The people see smiles. The elites see power." Ayana shivered. She realized the duality of this world. The laughter of the streets was a lie. The gold and silk were masks. The power, the control, the fear, that was real. Some rituals were simple. Girls were tested for obedience, made to perform tasks with exact precision. Some were given herbs to induce calm or submission. Others were asked to dance, to sing, to move like shadows at the will of the priest. Each act taught control. Each act reminded the children of their place. Other rituals were darker. They were acts of union, of control, of shaping the future. Ayana had seen older girls return from these secret chambers with their eyes distant, their bodies trembling, their voices quiet. Some whispered of pain. Some whispered of pleasure. Some whispered nothing at all. The human mind bends to survive. The elites justified everything. Every act, every ritual, every command was framed as divine duty. Temujin, the priest, the elders, they all believed that these acts kept the empire alive. That without fear, obedience, and control, the empire would crumble. Ayana did not understand, and perhaps she never would. But she had learned to nod, to obey, to survive. One festival, a named case, was remembered among the children. A girl named Saru had resisted. She had refused to obey a minor command. For this she was punished in secret. Her hair was shaved, her body marked with oil and ash. She cried quietly, almost silently, but the others could see. It was a warning, a lesson. Fear taught obedience, pain shaped the soul. The empire demanded survival, not kindness. Ayanna watched silently, her stomach tight. She clenched her hands. Her mind raced. She realized that no matter how brave or clever she was still part of the system, still subject to the whims of the elites, still a tool in the hands of power. Yet, even in this darkness, small acts of humanity survived. Older girls would sometimes whisper words of advice. They would touch Ayanna's shoulder, guiding her through the hallways. They would teach her secrets, how to obey without breaking, how to survive without losing herself completely. It was a fragile thread of hope in a world built on fear. The priest's voice echoed again. "Remember, children, the festival is both mask and mirror. The streets show the mask. The halls show the mirror. And in the mirror, you see truth. Obedience is survival. Fear is power. Submission is life," Ayanna shivered. She pressed herself closer to the wall. The torches flickered. Shadows moved. The elites smiled in public, but inside, they controlled, tested, and shaped everything. And she, and every child like her, had no choice but to bend or break. The festival continued, hours passing like minutes. Outside, the empire sang and danced. Inside, whispers, commands, tests, and acts of obedience shaped the future. Ayanna felt herself grow smaller in the shadows, but she also felt her mind sharpening. She was learning, watching, understanding, surviving. The sun rose slowly, casting golden light across the empire's capital. Streets bustled with merchants, animals, and citizens. From above, the palaces gleamed, towers covered in gold, walls decorated with precious stones. To the common eye, life here seemed perfect. Wealth, joy, abundance. But beneath the surface, the elite lived in a world few could imagine, a world of luxury, secrecy, and hidden power. Ayanna, now older and more aware, walked through a private courtyard. The marble floors were cool under her bare feet. Fountains splashed softly, their water sparkling in the sunlight. Servants carried trays of exotic fruits, sweet cakes, and fragrant oils. The air smelled of roses, incense, and sandalwood. Every detail was designed to impress, to control, to overwhelm. "This is their world," whispered the priest beside her. "Beauty, comfort, wealth, all tools. Every meal, every bath, every scent serves a purpose." Ayanna's eyes widened. She had seen the fear in the eyes of children like herself. She had felt the weight of power in the halls, in the secret festivals, in the obedience demanded. Now she understood. The elite's luxury was not just indulgence, it was control. The ruler of this palace, a man named Altan, moved gracefully through the halls. He was strong, confident, and commanding. Gold rings adorned his fingers. A fur cloak trailed behind him. He smiled at visitors, laughed in public, shared stories and wine. But behind closed doors, he held hidden power. He chose who would live or die, who would rise or fall, who would serve and who would be discarded. Ayanna watched as Altan entered a private chamber. Girls she had trained with were already there, waiting. Their bodies shimmered with oils. Their hair was carefully arranged. Every movement, every glance, every gesture had meaning. They had been trained to serve, to entertain, to obey, and to survive. "Every act is part of power," the priest explained. "Every gesture, every smile, every word can influence the empire. Never forget that." Banquets in these halls were lavish. Tables overflowed with food, roasted meats, fruits, cakes soaked in honey, wines that sparkled in golden cups. Servants moved silently, attending to every need. Music floated through the rooms, soft and enchanting. On the surface, these events were celebrations. But Ayanna had learned the truth. They were also stages of influence and manipulation. Some girls were chosen to dance, their movements precise, graceful, mesmerizing. Some were asked to sing, their voices soft, captivating, unforgettable. Some were tasked with subtle conversations, whispers that could change alliances, suggestions that could sway decisions. Everything, even pleasure, was a tool of power. Ayanna felt a mix of awe and fear. She had seen what obedience brought: respect, protection, fleeting favor. She had seen what disobedience brought: punishment, shame, fear. Luxury was a reward, but it was also a trap. Everything had a price. Some elites were known to rise and fall with astonishing speed. One girl, Tamira, had been chosen for her beauty and intelligence. She learned quickly. She became a favorite of Altan. She dined at his table, whispered in his ear, and moved among the highest ranks. But one mistake, a word spoken out of turn, and she was discarded, sent to distant lands, her beauty and influence gone. Ayana shivered as she remembered Tamira's hollow eyes, her silent despair. "Power is fragile," the priest said quietly. "Even the strongest can fall, even the cleverest can fail." That is the lesson of the elite. The elite also believed in the afterlife. They thought that all acts, secret or public, would be judged beyond death. Obedience, cunning, influence, and loyalty were recorded not just in memory, but in sacred texts and rituals. Rewards and punishments awaited in realms beyond life. This belief made them bolder, harsher, and more determined. They could justify cruelty because they believed it was part of a divine plan. Ayana shivered again. She had seen the power, the luxury, and the cruelty firsthand. She had felt fear, submission, and obedience. She had learned that survival depended on understanding this world, its rules, its rewards, and its punishments. Servants moved silently, polishing gold, arranging cushions, lighting incense. Every detail mattered. The elite noticed everything. A flicker of hesitation, a glance too long, a whisper not meant to be heard, and the consequences were immediate. Fear was constant. Obedience was necessary. Survival was fragile. Ayana walked past a balcony overlooking the city. She could see the citizens below, unaware of the power that guided their lives. She could see the wealth, the beauty, and the apparent joy. But she also remembered the secret halls, the rituals, the hidden festivals. The empire thrived because the elite controlled everything: fear, power, and life itself. The priest's voice broke her thoughts. "Remember this, child. Luxury is never simple. Pleasure is never innocent. Power is never free. The elite live in a golden cage, but it is a cage built for influence. Everything they do, every smile, every feast, every act of seduction, shapes the empire." Ayana clenched her hands. She understood now. To survive, she would have to learn these rules. She would have to observe, adapt, obey, and manipulate when necessary. She would have to see past the beauty and the gold and understand the true engine of the empire: hidden power and control. She thought of Tamira again, and the lesson was clear: rise too fast, and the fall is sharper. Fail to obey, and the punishment is swift. But understand the game, and you might endure. You might survive. You might even wield influence, hidden from the public eye. And then there was the subtle thrill of it, the knowledge that every act mattered, every gesture counted. The ability to survive, to rise, to influence, to command, it was intoxicating, but Ayana had learned caution. Power came at a price. Every pleasure, every luxury, every smile carried danger. The sun had sunk low. Shadows stretched across the empire's golden palaces. The streets outside were quiet now, the festival over, the citizens tired and unaware of the hidden truths. But inside, the halls of power were restless. Fear lingered like smoke. Obedience still ruled. And corruption. Corruption thrived. Ayana walked through the long corridors, her bare feet silent on cold stone. She had seen much now. She had seen obedience, fear, luxury, power. And she had begun to see the cracks, the shadows behind the gold, the lies behind the smiles, the decay behind the power. Let me tell you about corruption. The elite were above human law. They answered to no one. Every act, every command, every pleasure or cruelty could be justified by the empire, by the priest, by the gods. And some, given so much power for so long, began to take more than they needed. The line between survival and greed blurred. Obedience became exploitation. Rituals became indulgence. Luxury became cruelty. Ayana had seen it. Girls punished for minor mistakes, while favorites were rewarded for secret favors. Wealth was hoarded. Positions were bought and sold with whispers and gestures. The powerful became more reckless. They believed themselves untouchable. The empire could protect them. The priests could excuse them. And so they pushed further, indulged deeper, and corrupted the system from within. Rumors began to circulate among the servants, among the priests, among the children who survived training. Whispers of secret acts, hidden wealth, and forbidden pleasures. Some said that the rulers no longer served the empire served them. Some said that fear had turned into tyranny and loyalty into superstition. Ayanna listened to these whispers carefully. She had learned to survive, to observe, to understand. Power was not only in the public eye in banquets or in festivals. It was in the secrets, the unseen acts, the hidden fears, and the quiet obedience of those who dared not speak. Rumors were both dangerous and instructive. They revealed cracks, weaknesses, and the truth that the elite hoped to hide. One final figure stood as the symbol of decline, Altan, the ruler Ayanna had seen in Chapter 5. Once strong, confident, feared, and admired, he now faltered. His wealth had grown too large. His indulgences had grown too bold. Whispers of cruelty and misuse of power spread quietly, unnoticed by the public but recorded by the priests and hidden records. Allies began to avoid him. Even the priests questioned his judgment in private, though none dared speak openly. Ayanna remembered the fear in the eyes of the children she trained. She remembered the girls trembling under punishment, the subtle tests of loyalty, the whispers of older girls warning the younger ones. And she realized corruption did not just destroy the empire. It destroyed people. It destroyed trust. It destroyed hope. Even outside the palace, the story of the elite spread. Later cultures would remember the festivals, the wealth, the power, but not the hidden suffering. History would remember the rulers as strong and mighty, but the children, the girls, the captives, they were erased. Their stories, their fear, their obedience, gone. Only whispers remained, barely audible, fading into silence. The priest's voice interrupted her thoughts. Look carefully. See how the mighty fall. Watch how whispers can destroy what gold cannot protect. Understand the lesson. Ayanna looked to the shadows, to the golden walls, to the flickering torches. She saw the truth. Power without morality, fear without restraint, and wealth without justice always crumbles. The very system that had made the empire strong now contained the seeds of its decline. The priest told her of one last act of corruption that defined Altan's fall. He had grown careless, indulgent, and cruel. Those who had once obeyed without question began to whisper in secret. Servants and children recorded small truths, hidden in plain sight. A single accusation, a single report, a single betrayal, enough to shift the balance. Altan's power, once absolute, began to weaken. Allies abandoned him. Fear turned into resentment. And slowly, invisibly, the decline began. Ayanna felt a chill. She realized that the same system that had trained her, that had shaped her, that had made her obedient, could also turn on its creators. Every ruler, every priest, every elite, no matter how untouchable, was vulnerable to the hidden truths, the quiet whispers, the cracks in the golden walls. The empire's records were clear. Those who rose too high, indulged too freely, or forgot the rules of obedience and fear, they were punished. Some quietly removed from power, some publicly shamed, some erased from memory. The system could forgive obedience, but never arrogance, indulgence, or cruelty unchecked. Ayanna understood now. Survival required more than skill or beauty. It required patience, cunning, understanding the hidden rules, and navigating the corruption without falling victim to it. Power was seductive, but fragile. Luxury was intoxicating, but dangerous. Obedience was safe, but only if paired with wisdom. The shadows lengthened in the halls. Ayanna walked quietly, reflecting on all she had seen. She remembered the festivals, the rituals, the hidden chambers, the fear in the eyes of children, the whispers in the night. She understood the human cost, the cruelty, and the fragility of power. "Remember this," the priest said, his voice echoing softly. "History will not always record the truth. The mighty may seem eternal, but corruption, rumors, and decay are the inevitable companions of power. Observe carefully. Learn, survive, and remember." Ayanna pressed her hands against the cold stone wall. Her mind raced. The lessons were harsh. The price of understanding high, but she knew one truth above all. No matter how golden the walls, no matter how powerful the rulers, corruption always leaves its mark. She thought of the other girls, the captives, the servants, the children who had disappeared into the halls of power. They were all part of the story. Some survived, some perished, some were forgotten, but all of them had carried the weight of the empire in their hearts, in their fear, in their obedience. And somewhere in the quiet, Ayanna felt a spark of determination. She would survive, she would endure, she would remember. And when the time came, she would see the truth of power laid bare. The night had fallen over the empire. Outside, the stars shone cold and distant. The streets were silent. The festival was over. The golden halls rested under shadows, the torches flickering like heartbeat in the darkness. Ayanna stood alone in one of the high chambers, looking out over the city. She had seen it all. The selection, the training, the rituals, the luxury, the corruption, the decline. Her body was tired, but her mind raced. Her chest felt heavy with fear, sorrow, and understanding. She remembered the first day she had entered the temple. She was just a child, trembling, almost naked, surrounded by gold, oil, and incense. The priest had spoken those words, "Tonight you are God deity." What happens here is not sin. It is the most sacred act that keeps empire, land, prosperity alive. She had not understood then. How could such cruelty be sacred? How could fear and obedience be called life? How could stolen children, broken families, and whispered horrors be justified as divine purpose? Now, years later, she understood more. She understood the system. She understood the rules. She understood the power. And she understood the corruption. Let me tell you the truth. The empire, the rituals, the rulers, they all existed on the same principle: control. They controlled bodies, minds, and lives. They controlled families, children, and futures. They created fear and obedience, and they used both as tools of power. But power, when unchecked, breeds corruption. Luxury blinds, influence seduces. Fear paralyzes, and slowly, inevitably, decay creeps in. Ayanna thought of all the children taken, trained, and molded. She thought of the girls she had grown with, those who had survived and those who had vanished. She thought of Temujin, Altan, Tamira, and Saru. She remembered the public smiles hiding private cruelty. She remembered whispers, punishments, and the strict lessons of obedience. She remembered the hidden festivals, the rituals, the oils, the incense, the dances, the union, and the tests. And she realized this is how elite corruption works. It is never obvious. It hides behind wealth, power, beauty, and divine justification. It thrives on fear, obedience, and silence. It survives by erasing the stories of the victims, and it persists quietly until someone sees the truth. Ayanna pressed her hands against the cold stone of the balcony. She felt the weight of every lesson she had learned. Fear, survival, obedience, manipulation, loyalty, betrayal. Each lesson was a scar etched deep into her mind. She shivered. She was small, but her understanding had grown. She had become a witness, a keeper of truth, and she knew she could not remain silent. The priest's voice echoed in her memory. Remember this: the mighty may seem eternal, but corruption, rumors, and decay are the inevitable companions of power. She thought about the moral question the empire had forced upon every child and servant. Are you a victim or a believer? Are you obeying because you have no choice, or because you are convinced of the sacredness of cruelty? Are you complicit even if you are afraid? Ayanna could not answer for the others. She could only answer for herself. She had survived. She had endured. She had watched. She had remembered. And now she carried the stories of those who could not speak. She carried their fear, their pain, their obedience, and their courage. Outside, the city slept, unaware of the horrors that had unfolded in golden halls and shadowed chambers. The elite rested in their beds, surrounded by wealth, pleasure, and power. They believed themselves untouchable. They believed the empire would protect them forever. They believed that the stories of the children would fade, and the fear they had sown would continue to serve. But Ayanna knew better. She had seen how corruption had weakened Altan. She had seen the decline of power when greed, indulgence, and secrecy outpaced skill and wisdom. She had seen how fear could turn to rumor, how obedience could turn to betrayal, and how even the mighty could fall when the human cost of power became too heavy to bear. "Remember me," she whispered to the empty chamber. "Remember the children. Remember the captives. Remember the broken families. Remember the screams, the whispers, the obedience, and the fear." She turned from the balcony and walked through the hallways. The torches flickered, casting shadows that danced like memories. Every room held a story, every corridor a secret, every whisper a truth. She had lived through the system. She had survived the rituals. She had seen the elites rise and fall. And she had learned the ultimate lesson. Power without humanity destroys everything it touches. The priest's final words rang in her ears. "Observe carefully, learn, survive. And when the time comes, bear witness," Ayanna nodded. She would survive. She would remember. She would tell the story. The empire, the rituals, the power, the corruption, all of it would not be forgotten. Not if she had anything to do with it. And now, to you, the viewer, she would pose the same question she had asked herself countless times. Victims or believers? Think carefully. Look at the stories you hear, the histories you read, the legends that are told. Understand the human cost of power. Understand how fear can be used, how obedience can be demanded, how corruption can grow, and how even the mighty can fall. History is not just what is written. History is what is remembered and what is erased. Ayanna took a deep breath. She looked at the golden hall one last time, its torches flickering in the darkness. She felt the weight of every lesson, every act of obedience, every secret ritual, every act of power and corruption. And she knew that the truth must live on. Comment, victims or believers? Subscribe, share, click the next video. And with that, the story of the empire, of the elites, of the children, and of Ayanna herself was complete. The lessons were harsh, the truths were dark. The fear was real, but survival, understanding, and witness, these were hers. And they were hers to pass on. The night deepened. Shadows lingered. Gold glimmered faintly in the torchlight. And in the silence, one thought remained clear. This is how elite corruption works. Always, everywhere. And the human cost is always paid.